Welcome to Snow Talk, the podcast series that brings you in-depth interviews for an insider's look at what makes our industry work. We will be speaking with snow industry professionals about life, about business and leadership in this often challenging and always satisfying industry. This episode of Snow Talk is brought to you by Fisher Engineering. And now, enjoy Snow Talk, sponsored by Fisher.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Snow Talk, the podcast of SIMA, the Snow and Ice Management Association. I'm your host, Martin Tirado of SIMA, and today we are going to discuss part 2 of a 3-part series on snow operations. This past fall, we discussed preseason operations planning, and now we'll get into the details of mid-season snow. I'd like to welcome back 2 guests on the snow operations discussion. They are Tom Marsan of the Beverly Companies out of Chicago and JP Sanieski of East End Group in Long Island, New York. Before we kind of introduce them and talk about snow operations, it is interesting that being in the middle of winter now, it's kind of been an interesting year. It's been a bit of a boom and a bust. Some areas have had massive snow events, even record-breaking, and other parts of the country in North America have had significant droughts, precipitation combined with unusually warm weather. And anytime you're kind of in an industry that's heavily weather dependent, these are some of the things that we're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to manage through. We're going to have plan around. We're going to have to use our people, equipment, planning, operations, and contracts to manage for these types of variations in winter weather. Some of these details we'll get into on this podcast. I would like to start first with JP Sanieski of the East End Group. JP, welcome back, and can you give us a little update of kind of where you're at with your mid-season snow operations?
Well, obviously, we definitely have a lot of winter left. Just a fun snow fact, 2015 was the snowiest winter that Boston area has had in their snow season, and their first plowable event didn't happen until January 22nd. And then they got 109 inches in that 6.5 weeks. So winter is far from over. Definitely there's models out there that are looking like this could be a drier winter in some of the areas that we service in the tri-state area of New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, and then through New England. A lot of the snowstorms have come and hit us strangely. It's been a lot of de-icing events or non-de-icing events. Temperatures have been marginal. So we've had very limited servicing happening throughout a lot of Long Island, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. We've been servicing pretty steadily up in the western part of New York through Buffalo, Rochester, and all that area. But things that we've been doing in our general areas where the majority of our accounts are is really trying to just be really communicative to both our employees and our customers, engaging everybody, checking in on them, letting them know that, hey, we'll call you when winter shows up. When Mother Nature knocks on our door, we're going to have to go service. So we're engaging our employees, we're working at them, and we're checking equipment. We're going over our processes. Even though the equipment hasn't been used, that's probably more detrimental in the winter because, you want batteries to run. You want your equipment to move. You want to make sure it's been greased and it's not just sitting in the cold temperatures not being used. So we have crews that are regularly going out, checking the equipment, making sure that everything's still how it was left, air in the tires, that the solar panels that are keeping the batteries charged are working, that they turn over, just little things just to make sure that when we do go into an event, we're not now trying to fix equipment that's been sitting there. But we're working on those engagements, the communication to our customers, checking in, letting them know that, hey, we're still ready to go. Because on a lull like this, without having your first event, in that, say, early December timeframe, you don't really have time to grow or time to work on making sure your services are 100%. A customer's going to expect if we don't get a snowstorm until February, hey, okay, a 2 to 3 inch snowstorm, you guys better be on point. You shouldn't have lack of employees. You shouldn't have lack of equipment. All these things should be already in place. Whereas, if a snowstorm comes in early December, sometimes, you're still working on employees or you're still working on that final piece of equipment to get in the right area. So the forgiveness is a little less from our customers, but as we always know, the customers is what we serve. So, we want to make sure that, we're engaging them, communicating to them, and everyone's on point. So those are a few things that we're working on. We're trying to double and triple check routes and triple check what we're anticipating to use for equipment and really just make sure we're as ready to go as possible. Right now, it's just a kind of sit and wait. We've had a lot of these winter rain events come through and our temperatures have been marginal, and, we might have to go de-ice or react more. The last few events have been more of a reactionary event because it comes in as rain. It might switch over to snow and then back to rain. So we can't do a lot of pre-treating. We can't have a lot of guys just standing on call. So even the types of events we've had this winter have been challenging and a little different than we have had in the past. But for the most part, we're ready to go and, want winter weather for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Good points. Now we go on to, just want to get some points here from Tom. In the Chicago area, you're similar to me. We're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and December was incredibly cold, but we didn't quite get the big snow event that they thought we would. It was just a small one with heavy winds. What are you seeing when you're facing? I know the Chicago area in general really hasn't had much yet this winter, but
so we've had a few events and we've been able to, get everyone out, service every property, really work those kinks out and make sure everything's ready to go. We're definitely in a lull right now, and it looks like, for another week or so, we're going to have some pretty warm temperatures. But JP is right. I mean, we're still early in the season. There's a lot of season left. We've actually seen a trend the last handful of years where most of our snow is coming in January, even second half of January and most of February. So it's not so uncommon. We've had years where, we didn't plow until into January. So no panic button yet. We still have plenty of time, and it's just kind of how the winters have been going here. So yeah, I would say what we're really trying to focus on overall are some of the goals and stressors that we planned on working on this year. So for us, billing was a big thing for us. And then our employees getting on and following procedures with some of our technology that we use. So we've spent a lot of time on the storms that we have had of making sure that billing got out quickly. We have our weekly meetings where we go through with our managers what needs to be done, what's not done yet, what's completed. And we're very transparent with that so we can keep on and do the things that we put in place. Another part that, especially with a little more time than we normally would right now, is making sure that we're staying up on our customer communication and collections and just making sure we're checking in with everybody if we haven't seen some payment yet. And, that's obviously an important part of what we all do. I think making sure you spend that time now while we're still in the middle of the season is a big help. We have scheduled and held some extra training sessions with our guys to keep them engaged as far as our field employees, just to get them back in, talk about things, go over equipment. We've really tried to focus on our new employees this year. I think we have some people that have been around for quite a few years. They understand how it works and, how it will fluctuate just based on the weather. But we've really been focusing on those people that are new to us or new in snow period, of really communicating with them regularly, kind of explaining like this can change real fast. We need to be ready. And also just making sure that they're still dedicated and ready to go for us. Again, I think taking this time to grease machines, just kind of regular maintenance. It is important that everything starts. We had a big cold spell right around Christmas time here. And we had a few days where it was tough for things to start. It was, temps were below zero and so on. So just making sure you get out and touch everything and making sure that that's ready to go and fueled and really just ready for the next storm is always the goal. And when you don't have snow for a few weeks, what that means changes a little bit. The other thing that we've spent some time on is just starting to plan for the spring, starting to look at landscape customers that we have signed already, starting to look at routes, starting to look at, our performance from last year and how that's going to translate to this year. All those renewals are out for that summer season, and taking extra time to, inventory equipment, budget for what we're going to need for this year. So maybe some things we would do 8 weeks from now, we're starting to do now, because 8 weeks from now, maybe we will be busy with snow. So take advantage of the time while we have it has kind of been our battle cry here with everyone. And yeah, the other important thing, I guess, about this, we try to keep a good balance of seasonal contracts and per visit contracts. And I think a year like this, at least so far, shows why we do that. It obviously helps with income, early in the season, and just kind of having that balance to help it make sense.
Yeah, good points. Simon's and other entities have kind of talked about just the concept of there's a cost just for readiness. Kind of like, having an insurance policy is a good example. There's other examples you can use too, but to have people, equipment, materials, et cetera, ready for even your first winter storm, there's some cost to that. And that's where, the things like having some seasonal accounts and some seasonal contracts come into play. Plus, certainly the customers really like that in the sense that, you're fixing costs for them to some extent. And they can budget more effectively that way, the more they can fix their costs. So I think that's it. And, another good reasoning when you talk to your customers about those seasonal contracts you can bring up, but good points. JP, did you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was going to say that the more conversations that I've had, especially when you come in, I mean, even at the self-performing, which we self-perform probably 90% of all of our sites, but even talking to our subs, having a slower winter, they feel better prepared financially because they've gotten a couple payments. They haven't had to really be heavy with employees or machinery or salt in those early months because it's tough to front end a contract so that they get paid before the snow starts. But now they've gotten a couple payments. They feel like they're kind of ready to go. And if, we get the snow, the subs are a little bit more engaged and ready to work. Whereas, if you come in, November 15th through December 15th and you get some bigger events, it's a little harder for the subs and smaller entities to really ramp up as fast due to the high expenses of getting your equipment staged, getting your salt ordered, getting, new shovels, getting, maybe some new equipment on board. There's always that little bit of a roughness between the first couple months. So having a slower winter definitely helps with our seasonals. Tom mentioned training. That's another part that I feel at East End, we're better trained this year with our internal staff and our subs because we've had that time to really go after the ones that have been having an issue, or this person's phone always has an issue. Okay, well, come into the office. Let's try to reproduce your issues that you're having with the app, or some of our bilingual employees, sitting down with them with someone else that can talk to us. And we really try to understand what the scenarios are when it comes to documentation, process, filling out our paperwork, the different steps. So I feel that we're definitely probably better trained this year because it's not just, oh, it's December. Now we're going, every 5 days we've got an event and we haven't had time to really catch up on what's going on. So we've been able to dig into those little things a little deeper. And Tom mentioned, use the time. Well, yeah, spring's around the corner. Could be an early spring. It could be a late spring. So now's the time to, start with sales or start with equipment purchasing or checking it and, using your mechanics or your team to, pull out all your mowers or pull out all your weed whackers or, go through your stump grinders or whatever equipment you might use for the spring to make sure it's good to go so that you're not scrambling come, the end of February, March when you want to try to get out there. I mean, even some of our southern areas, as we get into New Jersey, some of our customers are like, well, if it does not snow, can you start earlier? Can you get, mulch in the first week of March if we don't get snow in February instead of waiting to our normal time frame? So it's little things like that we're trying to work on and make sure that we're ready to go. And I think it allows everyone to be ready for that next snow event and a little bit more prepared for the spring with these lulls that we've been having.
Wanted to kind of go on the other side of it here too and kind of just talk about, with JP is there have been a couple areas of the country, the mountain areas, Western Michigan, some parts of Canada, and then, the Buffalo, New York area that had some massive storms, like in some incredible snowfalls, even in like kind of one-time events. I know that your company, East End, kind of went into that area in upstate New York and did some of these emergency services, plowing and melting and hauling, all that other kind of stuff. JP, just give us a couple of points of your experience kind of going and working in massive snowfall events this winter.
So there's definitely been some major snow up in the Buffalo area, specifically lake effect snow. And, just to fall back on that, if people don't really know what lake effect snow is not something really predicted. It's going to happen. You're going to get a couple days notice of, okay, there's some weather coming over. Lake effect snow is higher right now in the Buffalo area because we've had warmer temperatures and Lake Erie has not frozen. If Lake Erie was frozen, there would be no lake effect snow. Because the lakes got warmer water, and when the systems come over it that are cold in the upper atmosphere of like 30,000, 40,000 feet, they're pulling that moisture up and then it's coming down as snow. So the lake effect snow, if people were watching, it could have been 33 to 36 degrees, but they're getting 4 to 5 feet of snow. And these bands of snow are unpredicted. Like they're going to give a general area, and they are so tight that you could go in a 5-mile radius and you could go from 0 snow to 5 feet of snow back down to 0 snow. There's areas that when we were out there that you would drive around and, you go 100 yards and you could go from 5 feet to 0. And that's 100 yards on the same street. When we went up to service the Buffalo area, a lot of it was, one, we have existing customers up there. So we want to make sure that our sites were good and that they had service and we were good to go. And whenever the city or the towns were to open, their properties would be good to go. It was more of a backup to our subs that we have in that area, because we do sub out in the Western New York area, just being that it's about an 8-hour drive from our main headquarters in Long Island. So we would head up there to help support. But if we're going up to support, we bring in extra stuff with us. So, we had a convoy of probably 30 trucks or so. We had dump trucks, we had loaders, we had snow melters, we had plow trucks. We're bringing up rock salt, we're bringing up mechanics trucks, we're bringing up fuel. That's one of the biggest things is, all these companies are out there and the gas stations, no one can get to them, so they can't get fuel. If you don't have a way to transport fuel, then, machines are down. So, we're bringing up 30 trucks, but we're probably bringing up 15 to 2,000 gallons of fuel on all of our trucks so that we can keep things fueled. We have enough to get through a day or two if there aren't any gas stations open where you can get fuel. It's always trying to be prepared. We're bringing food up with us in some portion too for our teams. Our teams in November, there was 2 to 3 days where it wasn't a lot of places open. No restaurants, no grocery stores, no gas stations. So, you have 2 or 3 days where your teams are trying to work, but, you still need to be fed. And if you have to go 35, 40 miles outside of the town to find that, then you're traveling and logistics are tough. This last event we had, the snow came in on Christmas Eve and snowed through Christmas Day. We had crews up there ahead of time, but those crews actually were more stuck than our crews that came in 24 hours after the event ended, because they had to dig out. They couldn't get out of their hotel was snowed in. So this last event, when we went up, we, used the holiday to our advantage. Everything was closed. Wasn't really much that needed to be done during that, Christmas Day time frame. So we were up there right after the snowstorm and we got there Monday and left Friday night. And, we're around the clock. We're running crews, 12-hour crews. That's the other thing about these emergency services. You're able to kind of over prepare and bring enough people so that your guys are rested more probably in an emergency event than they are in a normal event in Long Island, because they're probably working 24 or 20 hours with, a cat nap here or there. But when we go to travel, we're able to plan it and say, okay, 7 to 7, you're doing this. And then you're going to switch that truck with another guy that was sleeping. Or we're going to run this loader for these 12 hours or 18 hours, and then you're going to go and rest. Or, so we have time to really plan and get the crews and the guys up there ready to go. It takes a lot of staging, a lot of planning. Quickly, though, we probably went from we weren't going to go, and then we went and we were loaded up within 12 to 18 hours, and everyone was heading up there. So you've got to be somewhat prepared, somewhat crazy to kind of go do emergency services too, because we have all this equipment. And I'll be honest, not all of it's readily scheduled. We don't know that everything's going to get used. We don't know that the 60 ton or 80 ton of salt that we bring up that we're going to need, or the 8 loaders are going to be put on sites and get used for all their hours that they could be, or the dump trucks are going to be used for hauling, or the melters are going to get used. That part comes with our owners, with my connections, with other members' connections, with other customers in that region, to really try to drive that and say, hey, listen, we're here. We're not saying that you're having failures or you're having issues, but with such a big event, it stresses out the entire region. And a guy that had 2 loaders on a site, well, when you get 5 feet of snow, you might need 5 loaders. Well, he doesn't have that because he's planned for a normal event that you can kind of oversee and get through in a day or two. And, a lot of customers would be very thankful that we have loaders or we have melters, or even with our banks, we have them all subbed out with our subs. But our subs are so stretched because they're in the region with all their other customers. To our customer, we're like, well, we can get your banks, all the removals done in the next 24 hours. So now they're opening with no snow piles, with 100% parking, The other part that you run into is that it's also a state of emergency. And you have to remind your customers that, okay, yeah, you could open, but you can't legally. It's a state of emergency. You can't drive on the roads. There's no reason to put your employees at harm's way. So we give them real-time conditions of the roads. We're showing them pictures of the side roads. You know, when you deal with a lot of your customers, they're like, oh, it's not bad near my house. Well, okay, here's a road 2 miles from, you know, this branch, or this is what the piles at this branch look at right now. You have 20 parking spaces, but now you only have 5 because there's so much snow. So it's really being communicative to our customers and working with them to make sure that we're ready to go for when the city or the towns do open. We're not experts at it, but we just jump at it and give everything it's got. And the only way we're able to do that is because it's been a light winter. If there was events in Long Island or, you know, New York City or Connecticut or New Jersey, we wouldn't have that luxury to send, you know, 50 pieces of equipment.
We're going to kind of touch on that and kind of a few other points as well, too. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, and we'll be right back to continue our discussion on mid-season snow operations.
For more than 70 years, Fish has been building snowplows and spreaders for waymakers. The ones who lead so others can fall in line. The ones who refuse to back down even when the snow is piling up. The ones who make plowing look easy. Not because it is, but because they're that good. Forged from steel but made in the New England snow, our roots ground us. They're also what drive us. So to all you waymakers out there, know we're out here too. Visit FisherPlows.com or your local dealer today.
So welcome back to Snow Talk. This is Martin Tirado from the Snow and Ice Management Association. We're talking about mid-season snow operations. But to kind of go back to, I want to talk a few more points here with Tom, again, being in the Chicago area.
We're definitely doing what we can. One of the other things that we do, and we've done this in the past too, but when we have internal projects here, we'll use our guys. We're lucky enough to have some guys that are pretty diverse in the types of things that they can do. So we've redone parts of our shop or worked at, you know, some of our offsites and taken care of some of those projects, you know, while we can with that time too. So I think a lot of it is us just sitting down and saying, okay, what can we do? What are projects we would like to get done? And then planning those things out, again, to take advantage of the time that we have right now.
Do you see some weather patterns changing, just looking at some forecasting longer term? I mean, it seems like in some ways winter just seems to be kind of staying on later and later. What's your thoughts on what you see for potential how the winter is going to end this year? What do you see? Kind of taking a look at even some past years, historical averages, and what are some thoughts that you're preparing for?
I mean, I think we still plan, you know, like we're going to get the snow here. And I think it's funny, as much as I think temperatures have been, I guess I would say, swing more, right? So we'll get some milder weeks, but then we also get some colder and more severe weeks. So I think there's been more of a fluctuation. We've seen this before. It's not our first time having time periods like this where it's warmer. But it is funny, too, that you look at the last handful of years and you can say they were more mild. But in reality, we were pretty close, even above our average seasonal totals. So as much as we've had that back and forth, we've still been getting the snow totals that we're used to getting. So it's really not that. Maybe the consistency isn't there like it was, let's say, 20 years ago, but we are still getting the weather.
Yeah, there are some parts of the country, even going back to last winter, like Boston area, got almost their entire season average in one event. For some areas, it was like 75 to 80% of their season average in one event. And that's really going to happen here as well, too. And then you see some of these, like the thawing side of it as well, too, including some, you know, events that really stretch on into April. But, you know, that's good. I mean, I think for anyone, I think, you know, a great message is winter still has a long ways to go. There's all sorts of different weather patterns kind of teeing up. You have to be prepared. So some other thoughts on that, Tom?
Yeah, I think 2 years ago, we got all of our snow in a 6-week period. Last year, I think we might have had a little bit of snow early, but most of it was in really an 8-week period. So that's been the way it's been going.
You know, JP, from your end, you know, with East End, and especially since you guys have a large geographic footprint of kind of what, you know, the properties that you cover, what are you seeing or kind of planning for and really kind of going into like the next 3 months till really you can kind of say that really heading into spring and 3 more months of winter here.
So I think the one thing that we're really looking at is not to try to predict, really kind of go every 2 to 3 weeks kind of and look at the weather and understand what might come through. The one thing I think we've all learned over the last few years is that Mother Nature is definitely not as predictable as she has been. The types of storms we're getting are definitely different. They're not all snow. They're not all coming the same kind of pattern that they normally did. If it's west to east or north to south or come up the coast or, however those are coming. So right now, I think that just looking at it, I think we'll be fine for the winter. I think there's going to be some snow events that are going to come in and, be able to get us close to those averages that we have. The scenario is just going to be, how much notice we get with those and what type of snow event it is. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed over probably the last 5 years or so is that there's more rain, there's more wet, it's more temperature driven, whereas it seemed like 5-10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was more just a snow event. If it was going to say it was going to snow, it snowed, and it was a plow, de-ice, and you're good to go. Now it's comes in as rain, changes to snow, goes back to rain, comes in as snow, or it comes in as rain, and they're all like, oh, temperatures are going to be marginal, you shouldn't have to salt or plow, and then it drops 2 or 3 degrees, and now you've got a salting event where it was supposed to be just a rain event. So if anything, we've learned to not really hold anyone or hold meteorologists or hold predictions 100% and really kind of look at that 10 to 15 day window and really try to understand what's happening so that we know equipment's ready or guys are ready or our customers are updated with the events. But I'm hopeful. We're all in snow for a reason. We either like it or we're crazy or we're both. And,
both,
so
right?
So I think, we all want it some way, somehow. I'll be honest. I don't want it all at once. I'd rather have, a 5-6 inch event every 5 to 7 to 10 days in that range. But I feel that, there could be a big event and that's going to give a lot of people they're close to their averages in a lot of our areas. And then, it's just going to be these little events that come through, or the latter. It's going to be a late winter and then it's just going to snowball the effect of getting ready for spring and getting ready for landscape season and moving into that. So it's going to be a fun 6 to 8 weeks here and see what Mother Nature brings, at least in the Northeast.
Good pun on the snowball, by the way. I try to use that one every once in a while as well, too, whenever it's pertinent. But it's almost too easy for people that are in snow and ice. But no, you're right. I mean, honestly, that's what some of this business is built on. We need to be prepared for the low times. We need to be prepared for the 3 foot and more snow and kind of everything in between. And that's kind of really what makes it a bit of the challenging part of it. But that can be sometimes the fun part of why you also need the importance of having good snow operations as well, too. The training and preparation, the equipment, yeah.
And you bring that up about the training and preparation. The other part, too, that has been tricky in the past few years is, okay, is it a full deployment or is it 3/4 of our equipment? Is it half of our equipment? Especially when it's not a 100% plowable event or salting event in your areas, you've got to always kind of play that off as well when planning an operation.
I do want to thank both of you for joining us. Tom and JP, this is, part 2. I'm looking forward to the third part. We're going to come back in 3 months from now. We're going to talk about all the postseason touch points. So it'd be kind of a good reference to see kind of where we were today versus, where we are then. And I'm kind of JP kind of going on some of your points. I'd say expect the unexpected is what they say, right?
Do we want to make a prediction? Do all 3 of us want to predict what we might see for weather in our specific area of living?
I'm ready to do it. Go ahead.
All right. I feel that myself, I'm on Long Island, even though I travel through all 3 states. I'll stay with Long Island in the New York City area. I'm going to say that this area is definitely going to be below average this winter, and it'll be an early spring.
All right, Tom, what do you got?
I do this, and I always do this. I think we're going to be at average, which is about 40 inches for us. If I say that every year, I'm right more than I'm wrong. So I'm going to stick with that. And it's kind of a trend that we've seen. So I'm going to stick with the 40 inches.
Yeah, good point. I'm here in Milwaukee. True. We all sometimes think like Milwaukee and talk to people from the South or the West, and I think it's it snows here 7 months out of the year. Maybe it does in the far northern, upper peninsula of Michigan, but we're mid-40s average for snowfall inches. I'm going to say this. I do think just because it's been a slow start that will be under average, but I don't think it'll be more than 20% under average. I think the winter season is going to catch up. And from what I can tell in the last number of years in a row, particularly when we've had even La Nina winters, which was what this is winter has a way to kind of keep pecking into the spring, meaning prepare for some April icing to slushy to 2 to 3 inch events when maybe the day before it was mid 50s and you think spring is here. Winter has a way of sticking around in Wisconsin, put it that way. So we'll get together back and we each have our predictions in here. We'll get together roughly 3 months from now. We'll do a postseason snow operations recap and we'll readdress kind of where we're at and go from maybe have a couple laughs at it to see how accurate or inaccurate we were. But JP and Tom, thanks again. We look forward to catching up with you again later this spring, and thanks for your time.
Thanks for joining us for Snow Talk, sponsored by Western Snowplows. We hope you enjoyed it. Check out the latest episodes of Snow Talk, including any you may have missed, at www.sima.org/podcast.